Welcome to English Language Academy. I traveled to the world's most dangerous island alone. Chapter 1: The Decision. The idea first came to me while I was scrolling through an old travel blog. There it was. The world's most dangerous island. The article described a remote place shrouded in mystery. Some called it haunted. Others whispered about wild beasts, treacherous cliffs, and even stories of vanished visitors. Most people would stay far away. Not me. I was always looking for adventure, and this sounded perfect. I packed my bag with the essentials: a sturdy flashlight, extra batteries, a compass, food, and a first aid kit. I didn't tell anyone except my best friend Mira. "You're crazy," she said. "Why would you do this?" "I need to know what's out there," I replied. Chapter 2: The Journey. The island was in the middle of a stormy ocean, far from civilization. It took me 2 flights, a bus ride, and a shaky boat trip to get there. The boatman was an old man with a face full of wrinkles. He refused to step foot on the island. "I'll drop you off, but don't expect me to wait. People who go there don't come back." As the boat approached the island, I could see jagged cliffs rising from the water. The place felt alive, as if it were watching me. Chapter 3: Setting foot on the island. When I stepped onto the rocky beach, the boat disappeared behind the waves. I was alone. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No birds, no wind, just the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks. The island had dense jungle and sharp cliffs. A narrow path led into the trees, and I followed it. Chapter 4: The First Signs of Trouble. After an hour of hiking, I found strange carvings on the trees. They looked like symbols, circles, triangles, and handprints. It felt as if someone had been there recently. As night fell, the air grew cold. I set up camp in a small clearing, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept hearing rustling sounds in the bushes. At one point, I shined my flashlight into the darkness and caught the reflection of eyes staring back. Whatever it was, it disappeared before I could see it clearly. Chapter 5: The Cave. The next morning, I found a hidden cave entrance near the cliffs. Inside, the walls were covered in ancient drawings of people, animals, and what looked like monsters. In the center of the cave, there was a pile of bones, human bones. I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Chapter 6: The Encounter. I turned around, but no one was there, just the echo of my own breathing. Then I heard a voice, a whisper: "Leave." I ran out of the cave, my heart pounding. The jungle felt alive again. Branches swayed as if something was chasing me, even though the air was still. Chapter 7: The Climax. By the 3rd day, I was completely lost. My compass stopped working, and the symbols on the trees seemed to lead in circles. At night, I saw shadows moving just beyond my campfire's light. My food was running low, and my flashlight flickered. On the final night, I felt something grab my arm. I screamed and swung my flashlight. Whatever it was let go, and I ran. Chapter 8: The Escape. I stumbled onto the beach at dawn, exhausted and terrified. The old boatman's boat was there, as if he knew I'd return. "You're lucky," he said as I climbed aboard. "Most people don't make it back." Chapter 9: The Aftermath. When I returned home, I tried to tell my story, but no one believed me. Mira just shook her head and said, "You're lucky to be alive." To this day, I don't know what was real and what was my imagination, but I do know this: I'll never go back to that island again. The end. I tried my grandparents' daily routine for a day. It changed me. Introduction. When I visited my grandparents last weekend, I couldn't help but notice how different their daily lives were compared to mine. Their days seemed simple but full of purpose, unlike my own, which often felt rushed and distracted. Curious to understand their way of life, I decided to live a day in their shoes. What I learned was far more profound than I ever expected. 6 a.m., Early morning wake-up. The first challenge of the day was waking up at 6 in the morning. For someone like me, used to hitting the snooze button repeatedly, this was tough. But my grandpa greeted me with a cheerful, "Good morning," as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We started the day with some light stretching and a walk around the garden. It wasn't just a walk, though. Grandpa stopped to inspect the flowers, admire the sunrise, and even talk to the neighbor who was also out early. "Nature teaches patience," he said, pointing at a budding rose. It was a simple moment, but deeply grounding. 7 a.m., breakfast and gratitude. Breakfast was nothing fancy: porridge, boiled eggs, and fresh fruit. But the preparation was a ritual. Grandma made everything from scratch, and she invited me to help. "Cooking is love," she said as she carefully peeled an orange for me. Before eating, they both sat quietly for a minute. "What are you doing?" I asked. "We're being thankful for the food," Grandma replied. It felt odd at first, but when I tried it, I realized how often I took such small things for granted. 8 a.m., chores with a purpose. Next came chores. I usually dread cleaning, but my grandparents approached it differently. Grandpa worked in the garden, pruning plants and watering them, while Grandma swept the house and dusted the furniture. I joined in initially out of obligation, but as we worked, we talked and laughed. "Every task is important," Grandpa said. "If you take pride in the small things, you'll find joy everywhere." By the end, I felt an odd sense of accomplishment that I rarely got from my digital work. 10 a.m., quiet time. After the chores, it was time for a break. But instead of mindlessly scrolling on their phones, they don't even have smartphones, my grandparents read books or sat quietly. Grandma worked on a knitting project, and Grandpa read the newspaper. I tried sitting quietly. It was surprisingly hard to resist the urge to check my phone, but once I settled in, I found my mind clearing up. It felt refreshing to just be for a while. 12 p.m., lunch and family bonding. Lunch was another homemade meal: vegetable stew and rice. Grandma explained each ingredient to me, sharing stories about how she learned to cook from her own mother. The meal wasn't just about eating, it was about connection. Afterward, we sat together and shared stories. I learned about their childhoods, their struggles, and their joys. It made me realize how little I knew about them and how rich their lives were. 2 p.m. afternoon nap. The post-lunch nap was something I initially resisted. "I don't have time for naps," I said, but Grandpa insisted, saying it was his secret to staying energetic throughout the day. I gave it a try, and to my surprise, I woke up feeling refreshed. It was a small reminder to listen to my body and give it the rest it needed. 4 p.m. creative hobbies. In the afternoon, my grandparents dedicated time to their hobbies. Grandma continued knitting, while Grandpa worked on a wooden birdhouse he was building. They encouraged me to join in. I decided to sketch, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. As I drew, I felt a wave of calmness and focus that I hadn't experienced in a long time. "Hobbies keep your mind young," Grandpa said, and I believed him. 6 p.m. evening walk and reflection. As the sun began to set, we went for another walk. This time, Grandpa shared life lessons. "Life isn't about rushing," he said. "It's about savoring each moment." We stopped by a small park and watched kids play. It reminded me of simpler times and how much joy could be found in everyday moments. 7:30 p.m. dinner and unwinding. Dinner was light, soup and bread. Afterward, we sat together, talking and laughing. There was no TV, no distractions, just genuine connection. Before bed, Grandma handed me a journal. "Write about your day," she said. I scribbled down my thoughts, realizing how different this day had been. It was slower, yes, but also fuller and more meaningful. 9 p.m., early to bed. At 9 p.m., my grandparents were ready to sleep. At first, it felt too early, but by then I was genuinely tired. As I lay in bed, I reflected on the day. It was simple but profound. I learned that life doesn't have to be a constant race. Slowing down, being present, and finding joy in small things can make all the difference. Conclusion. Living my grandparents' routine for just one day changed how I see life. Their way of living, rooted in gratitude, simplicity, and purpose, showed me how to find peace in a world that often feels overwhelming. The next morning, as I packed my bag to leave, Grandma smiled and said, "Come back soon, and don't forget what you learned." "I won't, Grandma. I promise." The end. The mystery box challenge that changed my life forever. I never expected a simple cardboard box to change my life. It all started on a lazy Saturday afternoon. My name is Ethan, a regular 20-year-old with nothing extraordinary about my life. I lived in a small town, spent most of my time scrolling through social media, and dreamt of adventures that never seemed to come my way. Until that day, the arrival of the box. It was around 2 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a package sitting on the porch. No delivery truck, no mailman in sight. The box was plain brown, about the size of a microwave oven. My name was written on it in bold black letters. No address, no sender information, just Ethan. Curious, I brought it inside. There was a note taped to the top. "Congratulations. You've been chosen for the Mystery Box Challenge. Follow the instructions inside and prepare for the adventure of a lifetime. But beware, this is not for the faint-hearted." I couldn't help but laugh. It had to be some kind of prank, but there was no harm in opening it, right? The first task inside the box was a smaller envelope marked "Open Me." The envelope contained a piece of paper and a key. The note read, "Your journey begins now. Use this key to open locker number 217 at the old train station. Be there by 4 p.m. sharp, or the challenge ends." The old train station had been abandoned for years. It was a creepy place people avoided after dark. But something about the note intrigued me. Maybe it was the promise of adventure. Maybe it was sheer boredom. Either way, I decided to go. The locker at the train station. By 3:45 p.m., I was standing in front of locker number 217. The station was eerily quiet, and the air smelled of rust and mildew. I hesitated for a moment, then used the key to open the locker. Inside was a smartphone with another note taped to it. "Congratulations on completing the first step. This phone is now your lifeline. It will guide you through the challenge. Fail to follow instructions, and the challenge ends. Your next task? Go to Maple Street Park and find the red bench. You have 30 minutes. The red bench. I raced to Maple Street Park, heart pounding. The park was bustling with kids, joggers, and dog walkers. Finding the red bench took longer than I expected. By the time I sat down, the phone buzzed. A message popped up. "Well done. Look under the bench." Underneath, taped to the wood, was another envelope. This one contained $500 in cash and a new note. "You're doing great. Use this money to book a flight to Chicago. Your flight leaves at 8 p.m. tonight. Check your email for the ticket. Good luck." A leap of faith. Chicago. I had never been on a plane before. The idea both thrilled and terrified me. But the ticket was real, and so was the money. By 8 p.m., I was boarding a plane with nothing but my wallet, phone, and the clothes on my back. The flight was smooth, but my mind raced with questions. Who was behind this? What was the purpose of the challenge? And most importantly, what awaited me in Chicago? The hotel room mystery. When I landed, another message appeared on the phone. "Take a cab to the Grand Horizon Hotel. Room 412 is reserved for you. Check in under the name Alex Carter." Sure enough, the reservation was legit. Room 412 was a modest but cozy room with a single bed, a desk, and a TV. On the desk was another box, smaller this time. Inside, I found a pair of sunglasses and a note. "Wear these tomorrow at Millennium Park. Sit by the fountain at 10 a.m. Someone will approach you." The stranger at the fountain. The next morning, I followed the instructions. Millennium Park was beautiful, but I barely noticed. I sat by the fountain, sunglasses on, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. At exactly 10:05 a.m., a man in a gray suit sat next to me. He handed me a folder without a word and walked away. The folder contained a map of the city and a new note. Find the hidden room in the underground tunnels marked on this map. Your next clue awaits. The underground adventure. The tunnels were dark, damp, and endless. I used the map to navigate, my heart pounding with every step. Finally, I found a hidden door with a keypad. The note hadn't given a code, but the phone buzzed with a message. The code is 0428. Inside, the room was filled with shelves of books, old gadgets, and another box. This time, it contained a video message from a woman. Ethan, you've made it far. Not many do. This challenge isn't just about solving puzzles. It's about discovering who you truly are. Keep going. Your next task will take you to the Art Institute of Chicago. Look for a painting called The Red Path. The Red Path revelation. At the Art Institute, I found The Red Path, a stunning painting of a winding trail through a forest. Standing in front of it, I felt a strange sense of peace. The phone buzzed again. Do you see it? This painting holds the key to your final task. Follow the red path in your life. Trust your instincts. The note didn't make sense at first, but I knew the journey wasn't over. The final challenge. The phone's GPS led me to a rooftop in the heart of the city. As I stepped onto the roof, a group of people clapped and cheered. A man stepped forward and shook my hand. Ethan, welcome to the team. This challenge was our way of finding someone like you, brave, curious, and determined. We're part of an organization that helps people unlock their potential. Are you ready for the next chapter? A new beginning. That day, my life changed forever. The Mystery Box Challenge wasn't just about solving riddles or following clues. It was about stepping out of my comfort zone and embracing the unknown. I didn't just find adventure. I found a purpose. Now, I work with the organization, creating challenges for others. Who knows? Maybe one day, you'll find a mystery box on your porch, and your journey will begin. I spent 7 days living in the wild with no supplies. Here's how I survived day 1. The shock of the wild. When I first stepped into the dense forest, the silence felt heavy. I had no supplies, not even a knife or matches. It was just me and nature. At first, it seemed exciting, like an adventure. But within an hour, the reality of my situation sank in. I was alone, and I had no plan. My first task was to find water. Walking along a narrow trail, I searched for signs of a stream or river. The sound of flowing water eventually led me to a small brook. I cupped my hands and drank the cold, clear water. It tasted refreshing, but I knew I couldn't drink unfiltered water for long without risking illness. Next, I needed shelter. I found a fallen tree with branches thick enough to block the wind. Using leaves, moss, and small sticks, I built a simple lean-to. It wasn't perfect, but it felt good to have a place to rest. Day 2. Learning the hard way. The first night was rough. I shivered under my makeshift shelter, unable to sleep. The forest sounds were terrifying, rustling leaves, distant howls, and the occasional crack of a branch. When morning came, I felt exhausted and hungry. I decided to focus on food. Remembering some survival tips, I searched for edible plants. I found some wild berries, but I wasn't sure if they were safe. To avoid poisoning myself, I only ate a few and waited to see if I had any reaction. Luckily, they were safe. By the afternoon, I decided to try fishing. With no tools, I made a spear from a sharp stick and stood by the brook. It took hours of patience, but I finally caught a small fish. Roasting it over a fire would have been ideal, but without matches, I had to eat it raw. It wasn't pleasant, but it gave me much-needed energy. Day 3. Building skills. On the third day, I was determined to make fire. I remembered seeing a method where you rub 2 sticks together. It took endless effort, but after what felt like forever, I managed to create a small flame. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. I used the fire to cook another fish and stay warm that night. I also improved my shelter by adding more branches and making a bed of soft moss. Sleeping on the ground was cold and uncomfortable, so this small improvement made a big difference. Day 4. Finding a rhythm. By now I had a routine: fetch water, gather food, and maintain my shelter. I became more confident in identifying safe plants and berries. I even found wild mushrooms that added variety to my diet. I noticed animal tracks near my shelter, which made me nervous. To protect myself, I built a small barrier of sticks around my sleeping area. It wasn't much, but it made me feel safer. Day 5, the mental battle. The loneliness hit me hard on the 5th day. I missed home, warm meals, and human interaction. To distract myself, I explored deeper into the forest. I found a large, open meadow with beautiful wildflowers. Sitting there in the sun, I felt a rare moment of peace. I also crafted a makeshift tool, a digging stick, to help me search for edible roots. It wasn't as effective as a real tool, but it worked well enough to uncover some small tubers. Day 6. Adapting to the wild. By this point, I felt like I was becoming part of the forest. I could identify the sounds of different animals and knew where to find the best food sources. I made a new discovery, tree sap. It was sticky and sweet, providing a quick source of energy. I also figured out how to catch more fish using a simple trap made from stones and sticks. Day 7. A new perspective. On the final day, I reflected on my journey. The forest no longer felt like a hostile place. Instead, it was a home that provided everything I needed, if I was willing to work for it. As the sun set, I packed my small belongings, a few tools and leftover food, and prepared to leave. Walking out of the forest felt bittersweet. I was relieved to return to the comforts of modern life, but I also felt a deep respect for the wild and the lessons it had taught me. Survival tips I learned: water is priority 1. Always find a reliable water source first. Fire is life. Fire provides warmth, protection, and a way to cook food. Know your plants. Study which wild plants are edible before venturing into the wild. Shelter matters. A good shelter keeps you safe from the elements and predators. Stay positive. Mental strength is as important as physical survival skills. This experience changed me forever. I learned that survival is not just about strength or knowledge. It's about adaptability, patience, and respect for nature. The secret town where no one ages. I went to investigate. Chapter 1. The room. I first heard about it in a late-night chat with a friend. She leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. Have you ever heard of Halcyon? It's a town where no one gets old. At first I laughed. It sounded like one of those urban legends people share to entertain themselves. But as she spoke, her expression didn't change. She was serious. They say once you enter Halcyon, time stops. No one grows old, and no one gets sick. How do you know about it? I asked, skeptical. My cousin claimed she went there. She didn't stay long, but when she came back, she looked different, like she hadn't aged a day. Her story intrigued me. I couldn't shake the idea of a town like that. Was it real? And if it was, why hadn't the world heard about it? Chapter 2. The Journey. I decided to find out for myself. My friend gave me vague directions. Head east, past the mountains. The town is hidden in the valley, but it's not on any map. I packed a small bag, took my car, and started driving. The journey was long, and the roads became narrower the farther I went. After a day and a half, I reached a forested area. The GPS on my phone stopped working, and I was left with only my instincts and the scraps of information my friend had shared. The forest was dense, and the path was overgrown. I parked my car at the edge and continued on foot. Hours later, I saw it. The town of Halcyon. Chapter 3. The town that time forgot. Halcyon was like stepping into a painting. The streets were clean, lined with quaint houses that looked as if they were from the 1800s. Flowers bloomed in every color imaginable, and the air smelled sweet. Children played in the streets, their laughter ringing out like music. But what struck me most were the people. They all looked perfect, not a wrinkle or gray hair in sight. Everyone appeared to be in their prime, neither too young nor too old. As I walked into the town square, I felt eyes on me. A man approached, his smile warm but cautious. "Welcome, traveler," he said. We don't often get visitors. I heard rumors about this place, I replied. Is it true? Does no one age here? He paused, then nodded. It's true. Halcyon is special, but staying here comes with a price. Chapter 4. The Truth Unveiled. The man introduced himself as Elias and offered to show me around. The town had everything: shops, a school, a library. Yet there were no cars, no phones, and no sign of the modern world. It was as if the town was frozen in time. As the day turned to evening, Elias invited me to dinner with his family. His wife, Lila, and their daughter, Clara, welcomed me warmly. Over the meal, I asked more questions. How does it work? Why don't people age here? Lila glanced at Elias and he nodded. The town is protected by an ancient force, she explained. It keeps us young and healthy, but it's not just about the force. We have rules. Once someone enters Halcyon and chooses to stay, they can never leave. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Never leave? Why? Elias sighed. Because leaving breaks the bond. If you leave, all the years you didn't age catch up to you at once. Chapter 5. The stranger. That night, I stayed at an inn. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with questions. Why did this town exist? Who or what was behind its power? Around midnight, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find a young woman, her eyes wide with urgency. Meet me outside, she whispered, by the old well. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed her to the well at the edge of town. She introduced herself as Mira. You don't belong here, she said. I saw it in your eyes earlier. You're not ready to give up the world outside. I just want to know the truth, I replied. Mira hesitated before speaking. The force that keeps us young, it's not natural. It's tied to the land, and it demands something in return. What does it demand? I asked, my heart pounding. She looked away. Our memories. The longer you stay, the more you forget about the life you had before. Chapter 6. The Decision. Mira's words haunted me. I spent the next day wandering the town, observing the people. Everyone seemed happy, but there was something unsettling about their smiles, like they were hiding something. I found Elias and confronted him. Why didn't you tell me about the memories? He looked surprised. Who told you? Mira. Elias sighed heavily. It's true, the force takes your memories. It's the price we pay for eternal youth. But isn't it worth it? To live without pain, without age? I didn't know what to say. On the surface, Halcyon was perfect. But at what cost? Could I give up my memories, my identity, for a life here? Chapter 7. The Escape. That night, I made my decision. I couldn't stay. I packed my things and headed for the forest. As I reached the edge of town, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Mira. You're leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I can't stay. This isn't the life I want. She smiled faintly. Good, you still have your memories. Hold on to them. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Be careful. The forest, it doesn't like when people try to leave. I didn't understand her warning until I was deep in the woods. The path seemed to twist and change, leading me in circles. The air grew colder and whispers surrounded me, though I saw no one. Chapter 8. The Price of Freedom. It took hours, but I finally made it out of the forest. When I emerged, the world seemed brighter, sharper, real. I checked my reflection in a small stream. I looked the same, but I felt different, as if a weight had been lifted. I made it back to my car and drove away without looking back. But as I reached the highway, I noticed something strange. I couldn't remember the exact faces of the people I had met in Halcyon. Their names were fading, too. The town hadn't taken all my memories, but it had taken enough to remind me of the cost. Epilogue. I returned home, grateful for the life I had. Halcyon was real, I knew that much. But it wasn't a paradise, it was a trap. Sometimes late at night I think about the people who stayed. Were they truly happy? Or were they just shadows of who they once were? I'll never know. And maybe that's for the best. The end. Thanks for watching English Language Academy. Subscribe now.